Joining us now is the director of the new documentary, War on the Diamond. We're joined by Andy Billman. Andy, how are you?
Doing great. Excited to see what Guardians news to read next. And then, just living the holiday dream, right? As everybody is, I'm sure. This time of year.
I'm sure. This is a fascinating story. So in the history of Major League Baseball, only one man has actually died on the field. And that man is a man by the name of Ray Chapman, who was with the Cleveland Indians. And the story of just that day, what led up to that, but also just the history that led to between the Indians and the Yankees is the subject of your documentary.
That's correct. Chapman was the only player to be hit by a pitch and killed. Also was the star player for the Indians in 1920, and also was I'd say the most popular player on the team. The best player was probably Tress Speaker, but the most popular player was Chapman. And the Indians happened to be in a pennant race battling Babe Ruth and the Yankees that year, and obviously Carl Mays. And sad and tragically, Carl Mays' hit was known for beating players, beamed Chapman on the side of the skull. Chapman collapsed, and he later died in the hospital less than 24 hours later. And, it's a romantic story, too. He just gotten married. He was about ready to have his first child. Obviously that was a terrible, terrible moment on top of another terrible moment. And then ironically, the Indians gathered themselves, definitely mourned the loss of Chapman, and somehow won the World Series. So it's a remarkable story too about how they overcame grief to win it all.
Absolutely. But it's also a story of a moment in time that sort of plagued Cleveland for a number of years, even as there was that celebratory moment for years after this. The shadow of the Yankees, the shadow of what happened to Ray Chapman lingered over the franchise.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, that's why I did the film, because growing up in Cleveland, you always wondered, well, why did we start hating the Yankees? Like, why did we have I Hate the Yankee Hanky night in the late 70s? And you start to learn about stories like this, and this is where it all started. And it definitely hovered over the organization, as it should. I mean, a man died. Mm-hmm. And on top of it, it really slowed down and slowly tore apart the Indians. And the Yankees were a juggernaut. I mean, Babe Ruth, the very next year, got the Yankees to the World Series. So it was two different perpendiculars. The Indians were going in one direction. They weren't terrible, but they weren't the same. And the Yankees went on to win many World Series in the 20s. So they did kind of, split apart that way. It started to grow into more frustration. It really festered with Bob Feller, who was the star pitcher and probably is the best player to ever play for the Indians / Guardians. Mm-hmm. And he had an autobiography, and throughout the book, he'd make a point. I hate the Yankees. Would be a definite theme in how much he hates New York. So we play up many other themes like that throughout the film. And to your point, obviously what happened after that really separated the two organizations. The Yankees went on to do their thing, and the Indians, they weren't terrible, but they just weren't the same.
Yeah, it really is. When you look at it from that perspective, it's a flashpoint in the history of Major League Baseball of what might have been. If Ray Chapman doesn't get killed that day, does he continue to play with the Indians long after this and change the destiny of Major League Baseball?
Well, of course. And the thing is too, like, Chapman was on that cusp. Bill James has always debated whether Chapman should be in the Hall of Fame or not. And, Chapman was supposed to retire in 1919 after the 1919 season, but he was convinced to play one more season by Speaker. And as we all know in sports, you have to wonder if he would have continued to play after winning the World Series.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's typically what players do. So, yeah, and then ironically, it just so many things changed. To your point, it also was the end of the dead ball era. Ty Cobb, Carl Mays were more typical in the 1910s, early baseball. It was more of an outlaw game, and Carl Mays was a very tough guy. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of it's ironic. Not only did it obviously what happened to the Indians, it really ended that Ty Cobb, Carl Mays era of tough guys. Polished athletes started coming through, like Garrick and Ruth, much more civil people you could want to come up to and hug. Ty Cobb wasn't lovable. Carl Mays wasn't a lovable guy, and that was kind of baseball. And that also, it not only changed the Indians, it changed the sport. Yes.
Truly, yeah. There was more of a thought of, hey, maybe don't throw so hard inside that you might kill somebody.
Right, exactly. Or hey, maybe we should be putting out, I don't know, 40 or 50 baseballs in a game and not just 12.
Yeah.
I mean, there was reports of owners who would get upset when fans wouldn't throw the ball back into the field of play after a home run because they didn't want to pay for more baseballs. So it just shows you how baseball's changed in 100 years. Just that little moment right there.
Then, of course, you go on from here. The Ray Chapman story is filtered in throughout the documentary, revealing more and more about that story. But you're also covering the history of New York and Cleveland. And while people think of the Yankees and the Red Sox, that Yankees-Indians rivalry has some actual blood behind it.
It really does. I mean, obviously with the Chapman Mays incident, but also you have the 40s and the 50s. The Indians and Yankees were either winning World Series between 47 and 55. Either the Yankees or Indians were representing the AL in the World Series. And many of those times, the other team finished second. In 48, the Indians won. And then again, in 54, they outlasted the Yankees that year to win the AL pennant. And then it really bled into the 70s. And people go, what happened in the 70s? Well, there's actually a Cleveland man named George Steinbrenner who grew up dreaming of owning the Indians. And then by luck, wouldn't have it, he tried to buy the Indians, was rebuffed, actually had a press conference set up in 1971 to buy the team, but Vernon Stouffer did not allow him to buy the team because of a stolen check accusation against his son. And so because of that, Steinbrenner ended up buying the Yankees a year and a half later. So, talk about blood. There's technically a Bay Village, Ohio family owning the Yankees. And the Steinbrenners are from Bay Village, Ohio. I mean, they have a huge impact on the city. So, yes, there's a lot of lineage between these two teams, even if Yankee fans are in a little bit of denial about it, which I can understand. This is more from a Cleveland perspective, obviously. But Yankees and Red Sox is a fantastic rivalry. We're not debating which one's better because that's not fair to that rivalry. It's just not. Yankees and Red Sox is wonderful. What we're saying is Yankees and Indians has a lot of depth to it and a lot of layers to it.
I definitely think you've covered that very well here with and you've given it such perspective. I loved specifically, oddly enough, I loved the Jim Abbott. Jim Abbott has some very interesting things to say about this rivalry.
He does. He found it very intimidating, very loud, and in fact, we didn't get into in the film because obviously we think on the cutting room floor. But Abbott's no hitter also came against the Indians in '93, and to us Indians fans, now Guardians fans, that was kind of the end of the major league years. '94 is when the Indians really took off and became the Indians of today, now Guardians. So Jim Abbott had a no-hitter, changed his career, and there's a lot of Indians personnel and former players who talk about that actually probably changed the Indians forever too. That was kind of the end of those bad Indians years and tragic moments and bad luck. And it really, from that moment on, you just don't think of that light with the Indians, now Guardians, at all. They're very positive, bright light. They were not that way for much of the 80s.
I was a huge fan of his, so seeing him included there and what you just touched upon especially makes that a poignant choice, and that your choice to cover people like him and bring in Yankees and Indians to comment on this, it works very well to give a lot of depth to this.
Well, yeah, I tried to give some people who could tell stories. Jim Leyritz, people probably don't know this. Jim is actually born in Lakewood, Ohio, which is just outside of Cleveland. So he's actually an Ohioan as well. But he grew up most of his years in Southern Ohio, but he actually was born in Cleveland technically. So he kind of understands some of the layers I was trying to get into. Kenny Lofton definitely understood it, played for both teams. My gosh, the guy lived and breathed it. As people will watch the film, will see. So there's a lot of people actually who technically touched both teams, which isn't surprising. That happens a lot in baseball. But there is a lot of, I hope what people get out of it is how there is a lot of depth to it and how there's a lot of people in Cleveland who see it as a true rivalry. Just ask Senator Sherrod Brown, who still to this day is very bitter over the Yankees.
And I love the inclusion as well of the Ray Chapman memorial that was that was part of the previous Cleveland Stadium and now moved to the new Cleveland Stadium. That story is just a wonderful story.
Yeah, that's kind of one of those. There's a lot of those stories more out there. Doing a lot of sports in my time, it's amazing. Sometimes you'll go through like a closet in Alabama, and it's like, oh, is this like a late '80s Orange Bowl trophy? You kind of dust it off. You're like, I can't believe this is laying here. And so those kind of things do happen. But for the people who don't know, after Ray Chapman died, they made a plaque honoring his life and career. and it went missing for many years. It probably went missing at some time with the League Park move over to Municipal, but it's obviously not noted how it got lost. And one of the personnel who worked for the Indians found it in 2007 and unearthed it. And it now displays proudly in the stadium. And it's amazing how those things get lost, isn't it? It's just amazing how those things get misplaced. But that just tells you kind of more the treasure hunting that goes on in the story. That was a big moment. It was all over USA Today. They did a wonderful article covering it almost 20 years ago now.
And it's one of the things about baseball, too, though. And I got a friend of mine into being a Chicago Cubs fan just on one bus trip to a Cubs game. I was telling her all of the lore behind the Cubs all those years, and that's how she became a Cubs fan. And this is kind of a story like that where you're kind of revealing all these little things that make you love Major League Baseball, but also make you, like, fascinated by it. Like Ray Chapman is a story that generations get told over time. Like, this is why we've had such bad blood with the Yankees for so long, as a guy actually was killed in a game.
Correct. It wasn't just a meaningless thing like the Yankees always win, or maybe we had some competitive series in the 90s or in the 40s. No, it has a lot more layers to it, and that's why we tell the story the way we did. And you're right. I think baseball is a very charming game, and baseball is, for a long time, and kind of still is, it's one of the few games where it feels like you can touch the players. When you're in the certain stadiums, you can get very, very close. Basketball, you can, but it's very limited. Football, you're just never close. It feels like, because of the big stadiums and the helmets and the padding. But baseball, if you get a good ticket, and there's not just a small group on the court, obviously in baseball it's throughout. You can really get a feel and touch the game. I think that's what makes baseball so special. On top of the transitioning of players, I love baseball for that matter. Following the minors, seeing players come up and come down. It's, I know they always talk about football that way, but really the ultimate chess game is in baseball. It's really a shifting roster day to day, and it makes it kind of quirky and fun. So, now knowing you're a Cubs fan, seeing Ronnie Woo Woo run around the late 90s makes it entertaining.
Absolutely.
Around what's gonna happen this day with Sosa and whatever else.
Yeah,
makes it fun.
Well, Andy, how can people see the movie?
Amazon or Apple. You just type in the title, War on the Diamond. Amazon, Apple, any video on demand streaming, DirecTV, AT&T, Xfinity. Just type in War on the Diamond. If you want more information on War on the Diamond, go to waronthediamond.com. Waronthediamond.com. You can always, the DVDs are coming out soon, so you need some stocking stuffers. There you go. And always, too, you can check me out at Official Cleveland Sports. I always give information what's going on with the film. That's at Official Cleveland Sports. But buy War on the Diamond today, everybody, including Sean, the Cubs fan, at Amazon. Check it out.
Terrific. Thank you, Andy. Have a good day.
Sean, you're the man. Thanks, brother.
All right.